up by like where the screen, like the flap opens up.
No,
like
that's
that bar
normal.
part.
That's where mine gets hot too.
Well, it's like super hot. Is it bad if it's super hot?
No, it just means it's working hard.
Okay, good. Because it like burns my fingers to the touch.
No. Nathan, Patrick and I both just found out that you, in our latest snack box, you gave us a Shang-Chi Lego, like a small Shang-Chi Lego set. And I just wanted to say thank you. I'm sorry I didn't look harder through the snacks, but what a delightful find. Thanks, man.
Thank you, Nathan.
All right.
KJ's box was lost for a long time, so.
That's true. It was lost for a long time. Let's do the food now. Where's the... Here we go.
You're listening to the Janchi Show, hosted by 3 Korean American adoptees diving headfirst into what it means to be adopted, Korean American, and more. And now, here's your hosts, Nathan, Patrick, and KJ.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Janchi Show. Been a while, an extra week. Been an extra week, and I've completely forgotten what I say when I usually roll into these things. But I do remember that my name is Patrick, and I am joined by one of my fellow co-hosts. KJ Relke is in the building today. Nathan Nowak is out of the office.
Yeah.
He's on a trip. I don't remember where.
Yeah, I don't either.
On a
we
trip
could have
from
texted
life.
him and asked, but...
On a trip from life, apparently, because KJ RIP'd him. But, yeah, he told us where he was going. Something.
Did
We're
he?
bad friends.
I don't know if he's being a dad, if he's doing a work thing, if he's just, like, running con now. I don't know. If he's, like, running for governor of Colorado. Is that what's happening?
It might be a combination of all four.
Yeah, maybe.
I'd be into it.
Nathan, you can yell at us when you hear this. Just send us a big old voice memo, and we'll play it on the air.
That's perfect. That would be great content for the next solo episode. Okay,
just call in 972. Wait, that's not.
We'll save that for the plugs. Because I don't know if anybody's going to call in during the show. Maybe they would.
That would be amazing. What if they just did and left a long voicemail where they react to everything that they hear us saying in real time?
I wish they would, because then we could do an episode where we react to their reactions.
Nope.
Very Inception.
That sounds terrible.
Very Tenet. Anyways, we are 2/3 of the Janchi Show. And KJ, what does Janchi mean for all of our new listeners who are joining us?
Janchi is a Korean word which means to feast or celebrate. Probably to feast. I don't know. I keep going back and forth on that. I think it means to feast. The celebration is implied, but we use it. We call ourselves Janchi Show because we're here to celebrate our Korean adopted heritage. I don't know, just all the intersectional identities that make us who we are. And also, we eat food at the end of the show. But in honor of Nathan's not being here, we're probably not going to do that in this one. Or maybe we will. I don't know. We'll see where the wind takes us.
We haven't decided yet.
Yeah,
I think it's a game time decision.
It's a game time decision.
Set it up and hit it out of the park.
Yeah.
I'll take a drink of water.
All right. So while Patrick is taking a drink of water and we're finding our feet, our podcasting legs, as one might say, it's one of those things where we took this month-long break and I'm like, did we come back too soon? But I don't think it's been that. It's just been kind of an unfortunate amount of life happening that's been making it kind of hard to schedule things and do the things. And yeah, so slowly we're inching closer to the big century of episode numbers. I don't even know what episode
our
number
first
this is.
season was 94 episodes, and then this is
and then we
episode 1 of season 2.
Or this is bonus episode number 7 before we launch into season 2.
Oh yeah, exactly. We got a few bonus episodes. Forgot about those.
It's fine. They weren't that important. I didn't pour my heart and soul into them. It's fine.
I liked I think a lot of people liked your bonus episode. A lot of people.
You poured your heart and soul into your bonus episode, but not that important.
Every time I'm just by myself, it is heart and soul. Shout out Jen Frederick. All right. Nathan is very happy he's not here right now.
Nathan is rolling his eyes so hard. He's like,
"Oh, he totally is."
Get to the point. What is the point, Patrick?
We're easing back into it, I think, is the point.
Yeah, I said we're finding our podcasting legs. Shiver me
right.
timbers, batten down the hatches. It's podcasting time.
Ahoy. Is that one?
Why not?
Okay. Anyways, I don't know. The point is that generally we would talk about things that we probably could relate to adoption in some sort of way, or potentially, I guess, being Korean American, finding our legs in that arena, which I feel like I've been doing a lot of lately. So something that I was privileged to just recently take a part in. I was in DC again for the second time in a month, which is in itself is a privilege, I guess, to be traveling around in this time of varying diseases, which are not great. I was in DC for the Korean American Grassroots Conference because I was invited to speak about the Adoptee Citizenship Act, which I felt was a very big honor and privilege, and I was very grateful to be able to do that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was initially it wasn't awkward, but somebody asked me this while I was there, another adoptee, but they asked me if I had ever been in a room with this many just Korean or Korean American people. And I was at first like, yes, but then I was like, actually, I don't think so. Because when we were in LA in K-Town, I don't feel like we were ever just with a bunch of just Korean people who were all at the same event, or Korean American people, non-adopted.
Wait, how many people were at this event?
That's a great question. So I would say 60, 70, maybe 80. Well, at the gala, I would say like closer to 100, but just for the conference part that I was a part of, I would say anywhere from 50 to 70.
Okay, and then you didn't go to CAFLA, right?
No. Oh, yes.
You photoshopped yourself into that business.
I photoshopped myself into the award ceremony, yes.
You were there in spirit, but not in person. Yeah, okay. Because I was going to say, like, the CAFLA Gala was a big event. And
Great
so
point.
Probably, I don't know. I mean, I'm probably undershooting it because the tables make it spread out, but no, I mean, there were probably like 300 to 500 people, which I realize is a large range, but the tables make it, so, and that was Korean Americans. And so, yeah, that's a good point. Event. But yeah, I'm curious, what was your experience being in that space like that?
Sure. So, I really, at first I was like, it took a second to get used to, or it was like feeling comfortable. But, after all of this stuff and work that's happened and gone on over the last 3 months now, I guess I'd say, I felt like I adjusted a lot more quickly. And I felt like when the executive director Kim, and I'm blanking on his first name and I apologize. When he spoke and gave opening remarks, he spoke mostly in Korean. And I think even maybe 6 months, or maybe not 6 months ago, maybe a year ago even, I would have probably felt a little uncomfortable and felt like I'm just not understanding what was going on. And while at that moment, I also did not necessarily understand what was going on, I didn't feel that discomfort. I felt like I belonged in this space. And I felt like awesome. The pride that comes with, like finally identifying, I think, as Korean American and feeling comfortable in that. I felt like I was really proud to be able to sit there and be a part of that.
Yeah, that's cool. I remember that same thing being at CAFLA. Most of the programming was in Korean, and then like the color it was co-hosted by two MCs, and the color commentator spoke in English, and I was like, all right. So I was like inferring what was happening from like these half sentences about something that was just said, and I was like, oh goodness, this is a lot. I was also going to say a year ago when we started the show, but it's been 2 years now, so we were still midway in the show. We were in LA not that long ago, right?
No, it's coming up, I think. It was like the end of August last year. So we're close.
Wild.
Honestly, July feels like it was yesterday. It was July 1st. Like I woke up this morning, I was like, damn, it's already August. Wild.
Oh, really? I feel like July was 3 months ago.
Oh, so you're past it.
It was like it was just super, super long. I feel like it was like a triple XL.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
So,
well, why are you feeling like it was going so long?
Bro, I just had a lot of work, a lot of boring work stuff that made it long. So we don't have to get into it on the podcast.
Right.
We can
We
get
don't have to
into
talk
it
about that.
in our friend cast.
And
which is
our
what we
friend
call our text
cast.
chain.
Yeah, which you
Actually,
are not
our
privy
text
to,
chain is
listener.
Our text chain is called Feisty Boys.
It is called Feisty Boys. Been almost the entire time that we've had a text chain.
That's not true. It was called the Janchi Boys for a while.
I feel like probably the majority of the existence of the text chain.
When I discovered Feisty Boys, I was like, oh yeah, this is it.
Was that an episode reference? Did we say that
I don't think so.
in an episode once?
I mean, probably we did, but
yeah. Anyways, what were we talking about?
We were talking about your time at the Korean American Grassroots Association of America.
So feeling comfortable, that was really great. The conversation that I was a part of was with Joy Alessi. She is a Korean adoptee who was an impacted community member until about 2 years ago when she finally received her citizenship. And I had the privilege of, it was just a conversation between us two, which was our presentation, and getting to hear more about her story and going through that entire process. And she's also been advocating for this issue for a long time, for at least, I think, the last 6 years officially. And so it was really cool to be able to have that conversation in front of this crowd of people. There were a few Korean adoptees there, but most people were just Korean American or allies in some sense. And the coolest part about it, I thought, is that, so the whole purpose of this gala is to help, or this organization is to help educate people on getting politically active.
Yeah.
And so, like, bridging the grassroots to the capital, essentially, in politics. And so the majority of the attendees were actually younger kids, I'll say. So either in high school or in college, who were interested in getting active politically and participating in stuff like that. And so it was really cool to have this conversation and to like look out in the crowd and look at their faces and see how just intently that they were paying attention. And then they asked some really, really great questions. I'm kind of blanking on what the questions are. I should have came more prepared, but I just remember, like, we went a little bit over time on our conversation for the Q&A part of it. And then when we got to the Q&A, we ended up running over on time on that because people had so many questions. So that was probably the highlight for me, was just getting reaffirmed in the hope for the future, especially in a time where we are currently feeling hopeless a lot of times. Just being able to have these conversations and connect with some of these kids and see how excited they are about doing this work and making the change that we're hoping to see that was probably my favorite part overall. I don't know if that's what I was leading into talking about, but that's where I ended up.
No, I mean, I think it's cool. If you want to search for it, it's kagc.us, or you can just Google Korean American Grassroots Conference. They have a good website that is in English, which is helpful. There's also a Korean section. I don't know. Sometimes you go to Korean American Resources and it's still mostly in Korean. And you're like, I don't know how to do this.
Right.
But it's in English and you can translate it in Korean if you just want to have a look around. I mean, it looks like it's generally a good website. And it's interesting too. Like, I don't know, just as I think about who I am, this is the philosophy, I guess, section of the podcast. As I think about who I am as a political person, it's interesting to see, like, this is the topics that are important to Korean Americans in the civil discussion, in the civic sphere. And so, yeah, I was just like, that's not a thing. I don't know. I'm still kind of wrestling broadly with like being a person of color, but I think politically wrestling with that is kind of my next step. And so seeing something that is hyper specific, and even bearing in mind like what we said last time about Asian American identity being something you can opt into, like, this is, to me, work email. To me, it's like, it feels like a thing that you could it's both a step in and a step out, maybe. I don't know, having done literally no looking at it. But it's just like, oh, this is like, it is hyper specific and it is us, but also like are the people leading the organization thinking broadly around just like Asian America and person of colorhood in America, or is it specifically like Korean interests and like South Korean international relationships, those kinds of things? So I don't know. It's just like it's an interesting thing that I'm excited to look into. Um, so yeah, and I think it's really cool that you were able to go there. Something that I think we hear a lot with other Korean Americans is like, oh man, I mean, I know adoptees, but like I've just never thought about them having a story, which is really disheartening. I think not that they say it like that, but basically that's what they're saying.
Right.
And so it's like on the one hand, it's like disheartening, but on the other hand, it's a fun quote unquote privilege to like say your piece of it and like add to that mosaic that is Korean Americanness.
Sure. It really felt like kind of another full circle moment. I think I've probably mentioned 100 of those now by the episode 95. But yeah, just to feel that comfort sitting there, even for just the opening remarks, was a powerful thing. I talk a lot about that, honestly, and just in here and all my other stuff, but just finding my way to self-acceptance has been such a struggle, I think. And just whatever happened in May happened that helped me alleviate a lot of that. It felt powerful because it felt like I've heard a lot from people who are like, your words matter. But for the first time, like I'm finally able to say that I'm like, okay, my word, like actually believe that, I think that was a powerful like self-affirmation, just to feel that. And then to be sitting on the stage with Joy, having this conversation in front of all these people and feel like, oh, you belong here, that was a good feeling to feel for sure.
Absolutely. Well, and I think the moment that you are able to make that a part of your own narrative, as opposed to something that you receive graciously, but a part of like when it becomes part of the rhetoric of how you affirm yourself, I think that is pretty transformative, honestly. And I think like that's a grace that takes practice to give yourself, to say like your words matter and have distinct meaning. For me, similarly, it's like your words may not matter to everyone, but they matter for one person, and that one person is reason enough to speak up. Like that was like the way that I had to get there for me. Even like, cause I live in this weird space of being creative and being a whatever. And, I hope that all the listeners could hear the intense snark in my voice,
and the intense hand movements that you were also making, which I enjoyed.
Yeah. But it was one of those things. I'm like, I recognize that I am like good enough, but not so good that I would ever have like, I'd never be like an A-list celebrity. Right.
Sure.
And so sometimes, especially when you have like that comparison, you're like, oh, well, what's even the point of trying? And yet there are so many people who like, if you write a song or you write a book or whatever, speak up and use your voice and your story in some way, it can be life-changing for one person. And like that, who knows what the butterfly effect of that one person's life being changed is. And like for that reason, it's reason enough to speak up. It's reason enough to share your story. It's a reason enough to practice in front of other people so that when that time comes, you're ready for it, So, and I'm really excited that you have like found kind of that self-affirming creed for yourself.
100%. I think that ever since I started really getting publicly or more public facing with my own story on Instagram, especially, I've gotten those messages, like I said, and it was like they were saying thank you or whatever the case might be in those messages, and taking so long to come around to that myself. But I think always understanding that this is why I continue to do that type of stuff, especially one of the reasons I made the pivot to being pretty LinkedIn heavy, which side bar on that has helped immensely with my job. Just to do that and share my story publicly there has helped with my career professionally. But I wanted to make that pivot because I was like, I want to share my story wider to a different audience. Not necessarily with the idea of connecting with adoptees in mind, but always I think that the underlying goal is to connect with other adoptees in this way. And it's been really, really empowering to see so many, or to have connected now with so many adoptees through LinkedIn, a place that you would not necessarily think, oh, this is where you're going to find community in this way. But because I've basically I post all my LinkedIn stuff on Instagram now, so my people who follow me there can see that. But like just continuing to be not necessarily vulnerable, but personally open with my own story on a platform like that does pay dividends to that one person, because I've had a number of one persons come up to me or connect with me and have that conversation and share.
He's had ones of
those
persons.
Stories, those ones of persons to come up. So it's a really powerful thing to just be able to remind yourself that what you share does matter, as long as it's not like hateful or anything, but obviously that's implied. But what you do end up sharing,
I would argue that even
share,
that matters. Your hatefulness matters too.
That is very true. That is very
chill
true.
out with that.
But it can have, a transformative effect on someone's life for the better. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think too, like, I love that you're sharing your perspective on LinkedIn, because adoptees never stop being adoptees. Like, we bring ourselves into every sphere, and for you to just pop up in like this sphere that no one expects to really talk about their adoption in, like, because why does it matter? And just be like, yo, I'm adopted, and actually this is how it does matter, and how it does affect the way that I live my life, and how it does affect the way that I think about certain things. It can be really, like, you're so open-handed with your story, and like that's always been a heart of like our show, is for the three of us to encourage other people to use their voices in unexpected ways and unexpected platforms, because you never know who's adopted, and sometimes like it just takes seeing one other person to make an adoptee feel a little more comfortable in their skin about their own thing, or to help them realize whatever it is about themselves. But like, just having that community is just like nice, and to have that community, even if you're like, hey, I'm thinking about this project, or whatever, in the back of my mind, and I've connected with this other person professionally who is also an adoptee, and they have the particular combination of skills and background that I want to collaborate with them to create something. Who knows what the something is? It could be a quilt, but whatever that is, like, it's because of those extras that brings us together in a unique way, that brings us together and helps us build a more robust, diverse, and like overall, I think, wonderful community, just by popping up in random places. And so that's always been a through line for our show, is like we want to keep talking, and really we're essentially, the podcast is us practicing talking publicly, so that other people can be like, oh yeah, it's okay, like we can figure this out together, and we can have these things, so that like we're all ready to talk when the time comes, or if the time comes, that our stories like change someone's life and help like push the needle forward in some way, whether it's personally or professionally or socially or politically, or whatever.
So speaking of that, and like speaking about on the show specifically using it to find our voices and share those different types of stories, I was wondering, and I wanted to ask you, because we mentioned our bonus episodes at the top of the show. Ever since your episode has come out, like I said, a lot of people listen to it. I really enjoyed it. I really like listening to Haley. I really like listening to Zach. I can listen to that dude talk all day, former guest of the show.
I mean, they're both brilliant. So I was just like,
literal
thank goodness
scholars.
for you two, because I'm literally just here to make jokes, I guess, and facilitate a conversation.
Literal scholars. But I think I was glad that you did that episode, because I think it's really important to have that conversation. We don't talk a lot about Christianity and religion specifically on the show, unless you facilitate that type of discussion. It's just I just feel like it's not a topic that we've touched on a lot, but you guys got into it on that episode. I was wondering, what has been the reception that you've seen come out of that episode, and have you felt, have any of the things that you talked about evolved at all, even in that short time since that episode came out? Or are you still kind of sitting with everything that you guys discussed?
I think so, like, not a ton of people have like reached out to me per se about the episode and things, and that's totally fine. It was it's more just to like, it's kind of a sit and think episode,
Sure. For sure.
just because it does get super brainy and whatever. But I think so. Like my hope with that episode was to just talk about Christianity, like in a broad sense, and like represent, like, because adoptees are so often adopted into religious families and into specifically Christian families, and then within that like common narrative, there's like a huge amount of diversity in an adoptee's relationship to Christianity and broadly to religion or to the divine or whatever. And so I think what comes out of that is you have some adoptees who really love being Christian, some adoptees who like can't stand it, and then everything in between. And there's an amount of trauma that can exist or joy that can exist. It's just kind of all of it. And I guess what I wanted to happen was like to be able to present like it is a rough time and also it can be a good time. And for those who have had a rough time, like, but don't feel like they can leave the particular structure of belief, there is hope and there's like a different way. So you don't have to totally reinvent yourself in order to continue engaging in spirituality in a way that also makes sense broadly for being an American, right? At the same time, after the fact, I have been wrestling with what it means to be Christian in America. And like where I see Christianity going. It's funny, like I'm working for which is something I never thought I would work from the church that I grew up in, but it's essentially just a conservative white evangelical church while also being a mainline denomination. So it's like the church in and of itself is just this microcosm of identity crisis. And I'm just like stuck in the middle of it, going through my own identity crisis. And then I also work for, hilariously, another Christian organization that is trying to challenge the church to be better. But I don't know that anyone has ever had like very concise, pointed conversation about what a better church looks like. Everyone just kind of knows it needs to be better, but I don't know that everyone's like ever stated, this is what my vision is, and we're going to push towards that goal. So it's a weird thing of like, it's just real easy to let these things not talk about these things,
Sure.
And I just wanted to provide some language and some space for people to begin to think about and begin to find the language to talk about those things. So for me personally, what that's looked like in the last 6 weeks or 8 weeks or how long it's been has been like a decentering of Christianity and trying to fit it back into just all of the other world religions, from Islam to Hinduism to Buddhism to, all like just the major world religions, and just set it, just be like, it is equal to those things, because it's easy for me to be like, Christianity. And just like for me to like put it on this pedestal of like rage and anti whatever, because I have all of this history with it. And I've actually had to come through that into just like putting it back down and on an even playing field with everyone, so that I can just be like, it's fine. It's just like, you're just broadly religious.
You're like putting it in the proper context of everything.
Right. Yeah, because it used to be like Christianity is the only way, and then I was like, oh my god, Christianity is literally the worst. Like it was like, however high I had it in my young life, I then put it that far equidistant, that far below, and I was like, this is awful. And now I'm just like, I'm just trying to level it out. And so that's what I've been wrestling with and trying to think through. And really that's come out in relationships, because I'm like, well, if you're really earnest about your faith, like if I met a super earnest Muslim, I'd be like, great, that's wonderful, I love that for you. But if I meet like a super earnest Christian, I still sometimes have to work a bit like to stop my gag reflex or stop my eye roll or stop my, whatever. I'm like, no, that is me being rude. I need to have the same excitement for a Hindu, for a Muslim, for a Christian, for a Sikh, for whomever, maybe not a Scientologist. I was going to say Scientologist, maybe not them. I don't know, whatever. It's not a religion. It's a cult. It's fine. It's a different thing.
How does it feel to be like navigating in that gray space? I feel like that's what we've been doing for a long time on the show specifically. And for each of us, we add these different layers, especially coming off the heels of this conversation and obviously thinking a little bit differently or much more differently about it. Like, how are you doing okay operating in this space?
Well, I'm reading a lot of philosophy.
So you're doing great.
So actually it's pretty interesting. So I had dinner with a previous guest of the show, Beth Perkins, back when we lived in Springfield together, and they're not religious. And her husband asked me just about like being Christian and whatever. And I think I was like on the cusp of this because I was like still in our show, and like we connected through our show, whatever. So I was like definitely in that, like, but in that kind of like Christianity is the worst, I think, but maybe not. I don't know. Maybe it was on the way down for me, but he was just like, I think if I remember correctly, he's an atheist, and but he's like just very interested in why people like religion, and they have a child. And so I was talking to them about like, well, how do you like, we got talking about like the afterlife and some of those things. And I realized in that conversation that like without Christianity, I would have no framework for being a good person. Like just no idea, any sense of ethics or any of that kind of stuff. Like metaphysics doesn't really matter as much to me because I'm like, I don't really care necessarily if there's a God, but like we should all try to be good people, right? But like without a God, why are you a good person? And what's the compelling thing for that? Fortunately, The Good Place was running and was on Netflix. And so I just like watched that again. And I was like, all right, I really got to think about this because they talk about like the afterlife, but there's no sense of like God per se. And so I was like thinking about that. And then Mike Schur, out of that, The Good Place, wrote a philosophy book. So I listened to that about a month or two ago, maybe less than that. And now, hilariously, this is really funny. So my sister-in-law bought me a book called What Would Marx Do? And it's a philosophical book aimed at general audiences, written by an English philosopher. And it's really, it's just kind of the same thing of like moral ethics. Like, for example, what is it wrong to be addicted to Facebook? Or I think eating meat is bad. Shouldn't everyone else? Like those kinds of things. And now we're getting into like equality and whatever. So it like just kind of wrestling with politically and ethically and whatever, like what is my own internal reason for being a good person, for being how I want to be outside of a divine framework. And then as those things separate, how then do I want to re-enter into conversations about spirituality and the divine and those things? And I think by separating those things, I'm able to come back to spirituality more graciously than just being like Christians are the worst, or, like, I mean, I'm sure there's good ones, but man, whatever, just being all worked up about it.
Well, it seems like it's kind of like finding your way. You step out of it, deconstruct in order to protect yourself as you re-enter those things from, I guess, our specific lens. I don't know. Am I off base there? I guess just trying to kind of process everything that you're talking about here.
It's certainly a new lens. Like, I think that's the thing is like, we just realize like part of our journey, and I say our specifically for the three of us on the show, part of our journey has just been like, oh shit, we're people of color. What does that mean? Like, oh, we're Korean. What does that mean? To differing degrees and those kinds of things. And so I think as we re-examine ourselves and as we re-examine like, what does it mean to be married in what is now suddenly an interracial marriage where previously we might not have thought about it? Or like, what does it mean to, for me, even it's like, what does it mean for me to be speaking in Spanish to somebody else here in Texas, being a person, whatever. Like, so like, as we re-examine kind of all of our things, then spirituality may come up. And I think like for you and for Nathan, y'all had already gone through your own kind of spiritual reckoning. But because I was more entrenched in it, I had like further to come back to untangle and like more gravity pulling me back into like, to come back into spirituality. Whereas for a lot of people, I think that there's like, there's no desire for them to go back to Christianity or really to any type of divine recognition and adoration or, any of that kind of stuff.
That's interesting. I wonder if that changes with age. I'm assuming it does, probably. Do you feel like people step in and out in that way? Or do you think when people step out, it's more of like, I'll never step back in again because of certain ways that like you've touched on?
Yeah, I think there's like, especially if somebody steps out due to trauma, like the chance of them going back in, like, why would you put yourself through that again? Like, sure. Yeah, totally makes sense. But I think if you generally have a neutral to good to like not that bad relationship with any type of religious, like institutional religion or anything like that, and then you just kind of like quote fall away, then essentially there rises within you, even if you're not verbalizing it, a like a question of worthiness. Is it worth it to go back into this? Like, it's not like, it doesn't necessarily make me a better person, and it's not making me a worse person. And so I think at that point, then it just comes back to, do I experience things in my life that I can't explain? And do I feel I need to try to explain those things? And then is a religious interpretation of higher power, like metaphysics, essentially the way to do that? Or do I just go into philosophical metaphysics, or, you know, like all sorts of things? And so again, it's just like, is it worth it? And I think for a lot of people who are quote unquote falling away from religion, or, you know, whatever, the answer is no, it's not worth it. And for a lot of people who are in their religions, the answer is, of course it's worth it. And so
Sure.
like, that's part of my thing, is like, even while I'm wrestling with this question of worthiness, I'm helping two Christian organizations try to answer that question in a way that would like create conversion, but hopefully in a way that like does it without like erasing people, without being terrible, like inadvertently terrible human
Right.
beings, or like thinking through things logically that just end up causing a lot more harm down the road than not, and, you know, whatever. So yeah,
I feel like that's a lot of responsibility, even though it's not your personal responsibility to do that for these organizations. I feel like, I don't know.
I would argue it's
a lot,
only my
though.
personal responsibility. Like, no one is expecting that of me. It's just
That's
a
true.
thing that I put on myself.
Sure.
So
And I mean, I think that at the end of the day, that's the tough, uncomfortable decision that all of us have to make in those types of spaces, not even religious spaces, but any spaces that we're hoping to disrupt the cause of harm that's been continued and perpetuated for a long time within these types of institutions. And I would say that I commend you for, you know, even taking the small step of just like trying to do the little things to break that up and disrupt that.
yeah, appreciate it. It's just like, you know, it's one of those things. And I think like this journey mirrors a lot of journeys that we take. Whether, I mean, it could be with the institution of marriage, with the institution of family, with the institution of education, or whatever. And so for adoptees, there is always the question of worthiness, right? Like when we talk about birth searches, it's like, well, is it worth it? When we talk about like, for a lot of adoptees who are separated from their adoptive families, then like, well, why'd you ever go back? And like, it's not worth it. No, either because there's trauma, or I'm just like, I don't know. I mean, we're different people, and that's where we are, you know. Like for me, education, like the institution of education, like not worth it. I graduated, I'm done, never going back, not a thing I ever want to do, you know. But I think like for me, it's a unique privilege to talk about something like this, and I think that it's because it's such a hot button issue, and something that so many of us experience, especially just being in America. Like Christianity is kind of inescapable. It's like a way to help maybe provide like just a mental model, not even the best mental model or a good mental model, but just a mental model for how to wrestle with these kinds of things. Because I'm sure some people who are listening are like, yeah, I'm like kind of on the outs with my family, or like I'm kind of on the outs with like being Korean, even though I'm a Korean adoptee, like you were when we first started the show. You're like, I don't really care for that, you know. But it's still that same question of worthiness and trauma and all those kinds of things.
Yeah, it makes me think of, when you're talking about worthiness, I think about, or in these specific examples, like, is this particular thing worth my time? I'm also thinking about, like, is there also this layer of self-worth that we're thinking about that underlays even that, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially from just the adoptee lens of just like, I don't want to search for my family because it's not worth my time, but really because I don't think I'm worthy of finding them or finding any of the answers, I guess.
Maybe. I think there definitely can be that sense of like, they already gave me up, so I have this innate unworthiness. But I think the opposite is true too. And I think you've already experienced this, which is why I'm so like excited for you, because like on some level you're like, is learning Korean worth it? Yes. Is it like worth it to try super hard at it? No.
Sure.
Right? Like, and but you've made your peace with that. And so then when you're at this event, when you're at Korean American Grassroots Conference, you're like, I've made my peace with it. And my self-worth actually isn't wrapped up in whether or not I can speak Korean, because I've made those choices. And like, I'm able to be like, no, the worthiness factor has already been answered for me. And like, I am at peace with myself because of that decision. Like, in that sense of like unity within the self, holding like pluralistic identities and values and things, like I think that type of balance is very Eastern and like very like that's actually in some ways like deeply Korean or deeply just like Asian or whatever. But like that's a thing that is like a wholeness within oneself is something to be commended and something to be praised. And so, yeah, so there is like is it worth it to find my family? No, but also the underlying, like, I don't know, like maybe I feel less than for not knowing my birth family.
Right.
And the opposite is true too, where you feel like, no, actually, I know who I am with or without my birth family. And so if I meet them, that's wonderful. And if I don't meet them, that's okay too, because I like have this worthiness answered for myself. And I hope that that's like anytime. This is what we talked about last time. Anytime I hear an adoptee begin to speak those words to themselves, begin to affirm their own worth to themselves in whatever sphere, that is something to be celebrated. And that's something that honestly, not a lot of people have, like, they don't take that journey anyways, you know?
Sure.
But for adoptees, sometimes it's kind of thrust upon us and we're like, well, I don't really want to go on this journey. So.
Yeah. Well, I definitely recognize the privilege in being able to get to this point. And also, I don't know. I just lost what I was going to say, but I appreciate you saying all that. And I remember. I think that it's, I think it's a testament to your ability to just like actively listen and to pay attention to and really see people. For you to pick up on when, like in the last episode, I started to use that language, and it was conscious. And I talked about it in that episode about it being a conscious decision, but like, in the moment, I was using it a little bit unconsciously, not necessarily referring to it as me using new language and utilizing it. But for you to like pick up on that and pick up on that with other people, I think is a really powerful gift and something that not a lot of us have. And so for you to see those things, I think is really incredible. And I appreciate it because it makes me feel seen. And I know that you're making other people feel seen too. So.
Hooray!
Yeah, that was a compliment for you. I don't know.
Yay!
I don't know. I turned an anecdote into a compliment for KJ, but I did.
Right. No, go away. Stop. Make it stop. All right, whatever.
Well,
did I just like applaud myself? That feels gross.
Nah, it's fine. We'll leave it in.
All right.
Well, I feel like we've had a good conversation. Did you want to do a food? I mean, are you still, or is there more conversation to be had?
No, I mean, there's always more conversation to be had, but I think
very true.
I will say, given all this talk around, especially around like using language and trying things out and the importance of using your voice and telling your story, I just wanted to like say, like, our show obviously does not depend on this. We have had 95 episodes with only one call, but one of the reasons I felt like it was important to introduce the phone call was so that people could try out language essentially. And like, and not feel committed to like, oh, I have to come on the show and do this whole thing, or, you know, whatever, but just be like, I don't know, I've been thinking about this thing. Is that, you know, whatever, or maybe people don't think like me because I'm a level that disgusts myself. But
did you just say the level of thinking you do disgusts you? Yes.
Like sometimes if I step back and just examine who I am, I'm just like, ugh, this person, gross.
I get
like
that.
If I described like if Sarah were to describe me to me, but like abstracted away, I'd just be like, I don't want to hang out with that loser, whatever.
I get that.
But if you're a loser like me and you think like this, then maybe call in and try some language out. And that's one of the reasons that I wanted to offer that, because I think it's just like a random question. I just thought I'd drop you a line, whatever.
No, I appreciate that. And I think you might have said that when we first did the voicemail, but I don't think you've elaborated on it like that. And I think hopefully that'll encourage more people to feel comfortable enough to sit in the discomfort of asking these questions anonymously on the phone, unless you want to drop your name, and then we'll put your name out there.
Yeah,
but
unless you drop your name and then you decide that you're not about that. Yeah,
exactly.
It's fine. Do with your identity what you will. That's the whole point of the Janchi Show.
That's the whole point. That's the new tagline. Do with your identity what you will.
Yay. Yeah, let's do a food. That sounds fun.
All right, let's do one.
All right. Welcome back to the food eating portion of the show. I don't have Nathan here to do his like silly whatever he calls food time, but it's food time.
I mean, he says it different every single time.
That's
one of my favorite things about Nathan is what is he going to say when we go into the food portion?
Sidebar, I don't remember if I told the story. If we did, we'll just have to cut it out. But when I met up with Jennifer for, I don't know, something, and after she had met Nathan, and she was like, he's super outgoing. He like doesn't talk that much on the show, but he's like really outgoing, like incredibly extroverted. And I was like, yeah, that is true. And I think that like that also kind of blew me away because like, you know, we just only knew each other online and then like we met in person. He's like going around and mingling and doing the thing. I was like, I thought you were more introverted than that, but I guess not. So,
No, we just talk over him the entire time. Sorry.
I think Nathan is just like, I'll say some things, make a few dad jokes, but I'm just here for the food.
I think I've literally heard him say that exact thing before. Make some dad
Nathan
jokes.
doesn't like us that much.
Well, he definitely doesn't like when we sing that much. I think that's something that
that actually deserved a repeat. He doesn't like when we
double up.
sing or the.
That's very
Amazing.
true.
Okay, so Patrick, what are we eating today?
We are eating black candy, and before you ask me to read the Hangul or what looks to be also Japanese,
It's probably Chinese.
Mandarin or candies of some sort.
Probably Mandarin,
it just says black candy, and I do not know what the Hangul says. Is that what it
Hangul
says?
says Huksa Tang.
Huksa
I don't know. Let me type it into it. Oh man, I'm gonna pull up my Google and type. Oh, where's that vowel? Oh man. Oh goodness. Okay, found it. Hook. Sa. Tang. This says brown candy.
Oh, interesting.
Is it black? Is it brown? Only time will tell.
I was gonna say open
It's
it up and I'll
definitely
look
brown.
down.
It looks like a Tootsie Roll.
It does look like a Tootsie Roll.
It smells like
Coffee and
coffee-ish. Toffee-ish?
toffee-ish maybe.
Bah! I bit into it because I thought it was a Tootsie Roll. It's not a thing to bite into.
No, you gotta work it a little bit.
Okay.
Hard candy.
Is it filled in the middle? Nope.
Oh.
It's solid through and through. This tastes like a hard candy that I expect my grandma to give me. Except not my grandma, just like America's grandmother.
Like a Werther's original.
Mm-hmm.
Right out of the jar. I don't think it tastes like that. Oh, you don't like it? I can't get to the middle.
Well, I split mine in half. I think it's got to like a burned part. Maybe is it a caramel? I don't know. Sarah, what is this? What is this? This is good podcasting.
Are you gonna give her the one out of your mouth or the other one?
Ew, no.
You
What
guys
do
are
think
married.
this is? Put it in your mouth.
I'm scared. A Jolly Rancher?
No, it's not it's not a Jolly Rancher. It's called black candy.
Or brown candy.
Or brown candy. Yeah, the Korean says brown candy. Oh. There, just put it in your mouth. She's licking it. What is it?
How many licks does it take?
How many does it? It's like a Werther's, but like not. Is it caramel?
Like tapioca.
What?
Like
I don't think it tastes like tapioca.
No.
The flavor.
I disagree.
Patrick and I disagree vehemently.
What do you think it tastes like?
I don't know, like caramel or something. Like a
Honestly, like a toffee. Like we
Yeah.
talked about earlier, toffee.
But isn't toffee chewy?
Yeah. Well, no, it can be hard candy.
I don't know. Well, okay. Well, that's a thought. Oh, I turned on some lights and they did not help at all.
Made it worse, to be honest.
Made it worse. Yeah, there's not much to say. It's a hard candy. Like, yeah,
It's stuck in my teeth now.
it's larger than a hard candy.
Yeah,
I got it in my cheeks like a chipmunk.
Yeah, I would like to see it maybe split in two. I think it's a little too much, like the size of it. Even though it looks small, but because it's so hard, it's like if you pop the whole sucker off of a sucker.
Like of a Tootsie Pop?
Yeah, like a Tootsie Pop.
Yeah, all right.
Like if
It's
you
like
put
dumb-
that whole
like-
thing in your mouth.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
what it feels like.
yeah. All right. Well, honestly, this is probably a great one because there's not a lot to say. I don't know
Not a
that
lot to
Nathan.
say.
I don't know that Nathan's missing out, but he can go live on our Instagram and
You can
give his
go
hot
out to
takes.
literally any CVS or corner store and buy
and pick up Huksatang.
extremely similar candy to this.
Their distribution is incredible. They've made it into the American market.
Oh yeah, I guess I should clarify, not this specific candy, but very, very similar.
I don't even know who it's made. Like, I know nothing about this product because Nathan doesn't have he didn't send us the package. He just sent us the thing. And so it just says
he's
that's
fiscally
literally all I
responsible
can
with the
say.
snacks
Yeah.
that we do on this show because
he's equitable distribution of snacks.
yes.
Karl
Very
Marx
much
will be
so.
proud.
Thanks.
Way to go, buddy.
Thanks, Nathan.
Let's jump into ratings. I was going to say, you can probably see Nathan's hot take on IG Live, or he'll probably like make a whole TikTok about it and put it in the After Party Facebook group.
Or I hope he makes a whole YouTube about it.
Or,
That'd be fun.
Yeah, maybe a whole YouTube about it. So, all right. Yeah, ratings. What do you give it?
I'm going to give it a... What would be in the middle? 2.75. I'm giving it right down the middle. Whatever half of
Of
5 is.
2.5. You know how it takes
2.5.
2/4 to make 50? Come on, son.
Cut that out. Cut that out. I'm leaving it in.
Amazing.
2.5. 2.75.
2.7.
My word. Yeah,
Incredible.
2.5, I think. And I don't get, it's not a bad 2.5. It's like, it's just right down the middle. I have no super positive things to say about it. I don't have any super negative things to say about it. I think it's a fine candy. I don't think it's great. I don't think it's terrible. It's fine. 2.5.
Yeah. I'm going to change the rating system. I'm going to give it a C.
Oh, you're going letter grades.
Yeah,
Okay.
letter grades.
We've
'Cause
upgraded
it's like,
from numbers to letters.
it's weighted,
I like it.
you know? I don't know. I'm giving
I get it.
Yeah, a C because exactly. It's exactly what you expect. It is the middle. So, because I was like, well, what's the middle? Like 2.5, but 2.5 sounds bad. So
It does
a
sound
C,
bad.
A C is like, no. It's exactly what you expect, not in a bad way. It just nothing flashy, nothing incredible. It is what it is.
I do kind of have an unrelated question. Who do you think came up with the letter grading system? And what point what was the conversation like where they were like, A, B, C, D, no E, we're going F. That's the worst. Like, what do you think that conversation was like?
I don't know. So, okay.
You're like, all right, and that's the show.
No, I was kind of thinking through, and then
I couldn't
decided,
tell if you were sarcastically thinking about it or if you were actually thinking
no.
about it. I'm being honest.
Probably. So, okay, in the beginning, after God creates the heavens and the earth, God says, "Hey, Adam and Eve, don't eat from this tree." And they were like, "Okay," and that's probably when he created the grading system. And then, he was like, "You know what? You guys are doing great. I'll check in with you every day. C, it's entirely average. You're having a great time. Wonderful." And then they eat from the tree. He probably was so disappointed he skipped a few letters to go straight to F. And he was like, and that's when you get kicked out of the garden. So there you go.
All right, I did forget. Oh, go ahead.
Alternatively, maybe there's no E because they got kicked out of Eden. That tracks. I'm right. You're welcome, everyone.
That 100% tracks. You heard it here first. The origin of the A, B, C, D, E, F, G grading system.
We did it.
Hooray!
Crushed it. All right.
Thank you, new listeners. If you've made it this far, this is what we normally talk about on the show.
Except there's also a third person making these dumb jokes with us.
That's very true. That's very true. Although we did that improv one time, and I felt like
he was very confused.
He didn't realize we were.
He was like, "Yeah, Nathan, remember when we were all there?" And he was like, "No, I don't." I was like, "Nathan, it's a bit. It's a bit, Nathan. Just laugh."
Was worth it. It was worth it. It made it worth it. Okay. Anyways, how do we even end this? I was going to say, I guess
you can hang out with us on social
media
media at Janchi Show. That's JANCHI Show, just like our podcast is spelled. You can find us online at janchishow.com. You can support the show at janchishow.com/support. I want to give a special shout out to Alicia Maddie, who has been consistently dropping money into the Buy Me Coffee. And I basically appreciate her making up her own membership tier. She's like, I want to support the show, and this is how I can support it. And so, Alicia, thank you for what you do. That's actually probably going to be increasingly important because clearly, as we're struggling to release episodes normally, we might need to have more support a la an editor. So, if you like hearing the Janchi Show regularly, then please chuck in a buck if you can. But yeah, otherwise support the show, janchishow.com/support. Hang out with us at Janchi Show. Send us an email if you want to janchishow@justlikemedia.com, or give us a phone call. Practice that language, just that regular English language, or your Korean. That's fine. 972-677-8867.
You got it.
Yes, got it.
Woo!
I just realized now that I have a desk, I could sticky note it like you do, like a smart boy. But I'm gonna say I have it memorized. You can find me at KJ Relke in the world, wherever I want to be found on the internet. You could find Nathan Nowak at nnowak on Instagram, or just be friends with him on Facebook, or hang out with him in the Facebook after party.
That's true. And you can find me at Patrick in the World on Instagram. You can also find me on LinkedIn doing all kinds of things and then putting that on Instagram.
He's the Asian one.
He's the Asian Patrick Armstrong.
Yay.
Hooray.
And I think that's it for us. So hopefully you'll see us next week. Until then, if not, Janchi Heyo!